Welcome to episode 2 of Diary with a Messiah. As I said, I'm just kind of chronicling my career in little bits and pieces and sharing some of my advice and opinions, about what's going on in wrestling today. I got a lot of good feedback from my first episode that I put out last week from friends and peers and even some family members of mine. And I also got some advice on how to do some things better. And I even got a nice message from a fan that told me to not do any more of these and that I'm a nobody in the world of professional wrestling, and that's okay. I don't consider myself a huge star. I have, unfortunately, the stars have not aligned for me to get to a much larger platform yet, but like everyone that is going through the grind of professional wrestling, I'm going to continue to grind myself and continue to try and chip away and make a name for myself still after, almost 20 years. So again, I appreciate feedback those have given, and we're going to start off where we left off from episode 1. As I said, this is episode 2, and we're going to start with where my training began. So as I mentioned, I started with IWF Training I want to say it was mid-May or June of 2001. And as I told you, that was a brand new school that was starting. It was a very bare garage in West Paterson, New Jersey that had a ring, and pretty much that's it. It had a few other essential amenities, got some music to play. There was a nice little vestibule meeting area with, there were 2 bathrooms. My trainer, Kevin Knight and AJ Sparks, they had an office. We had 2 small dressing rooms where everyone could get changed. And they had run some small events within that building as well to give students prior to me some, live event experience. I started in 2001. The school opened in 1999. So the school had been doing well on its own for a couple of years to that point. When I look back at when I first started there, one of the other trainers that was there that is a very close friend of mine and has been a mentor and a friend to me for, almost 20 years, is a gentleman by the name of Biggie Biggs. He was also a journeyman professional wrestler that started in the early to mid 90s at the original Monster Factory. So he's a homegrown New Jersey professional wrestler that came from a very prestigious school and had a really good background. And, up until that point, 2001, had a pretty lengthy run in professional wrestling and was, really starting to hit his strides in those areas too. He was every bit as good of a performer as he was a pretty damn good worker in the ring too. So he was a trainer that was very consistent at the school. Those of you now watching NXT might know the name Robert Stone. He performed in Impact Wrestling as Robbie E. and, performed all over the independents along the East Coast and everywhere else for, so many years as Rob Echoes. He was getting his start. I believe he had started about a year or so, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, before me. And there were some pretty other damn good standout students that were training at that school that went on to have some success along the independents. Josh Daniels was another great technical wrestler, a little short in stature, but he was kind of like a new age version at the time of a Chris Benoit. And then you had Roman and Hadrian, who were 2 big bruising brothers. Hadrian hung up his boots about a year or 2 later, and Roman continued on. So those guys had started before me, but grasped the business really fast and grasped the in-ring work really fast, where I was starting to learn not just from Kevin and Biggie Biggs, but I was also learning from them as well. There were a whole host of other guys that were there that were in different parts of their training, and Some were grasping it better, others were not. Um, but to give you an idea of how different the training was then, even though the cat was out of the bag as far as how professional wrestling works, the training mentality was still very different. And it's not to say that the training style today is, but my school, and I know a number of other schools that were opening and were open at the time, they were based around taking in students that really wanted to do this and really truly make a career out of this. Guys that were willing to sacrifice anything and everything, willing to sacrifice missing birthdays, anniversaries, anything that it took to become a professional wrestler. They weren't looking to take in guys that wanted to do this part-time, which that's still okay to do. My school wanted to be known as as a school that had a number of guys that would reach, the pinnacle. And obviously, the more successful students coming out of a school, the more potential students will come to want to train under that place. And that's what we were. And I cannot speak for any other training school. I would love to get philosophies from others because I didn't train there. But, our school was open 4 days a week, including, I believe it was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then Sundays. And when you first started at that school, you were pretty much laid a foundation of ground rules. And you were basically instilled that if you missed one day of practice, that was going to hurt you. And you were going to be behind the 8 ball. And that included not missing Sundays. Training was about 4 hours a class. And usually, when I started, it wasn't just a simple warm-up. We would do calisthenics for about an hour before anyone would get in the ring. And it would be anywhere from, 200 to 300 jumping jacks, 100 to 150 push-ups. You would do squats until you couldn't even walk. And I'm talking in the hundreds. And while it was tough, it wasn't to brutalize you into the ground. It was to teach you that you need to respect the sport of professional wrestling and you needed to earn the right to get into the wrestling ring. It was done in a way to teach you respect. And it was also done in a way to weed out those who walk through the doors that said, yeah, I want to do this as a career. Our trainers were going to test us, and that they did. Because after those warm-ups, we would sometimes go out and we would do a mile jog around the blocks leading to the building. Some days it would be 2-mile jog. And then we'd come back in and we'd do wind sprints and wheelbarrows, putting somebody on your shoulders in a fireman's carry position and do more squats. And again, that was to teach you to earn that day in practice that you earn the right to get in the ring. So that was, warm-ups. For me, for the first month or so, I barely even got in the ring. A lot of my training was on the mats, learning lockups, learning the holds, learning a headlock, learning a wrist lock, learning headlock takeovers, arm drags from a lockup on the mats, fireman's carries, all those things that my trainers were teaching me in steps. And I had to do it over and over and over and over again till it was literally second nature in my mind on how to do it, the proper technique, the proper footwork, all those little things that you see going on in television product today that many might think is really easy, it actually really isn't. And a lot of times my trainers, would use the term rule of 10,000, which is if you repeat the same thing 10,000 times, you become a master at it. And that's what it was like. Getting inside the ring, each practice, we would go through our rolls, we would go through our basic bumps, and then we would move on to a segment of training depending on where everyone in the class was at the time. And that was 4 days a week. The other days you were instilled that you need to get your body right. You need to work on whatever it is you need to build your body to look like a professional wrestler outside of the wrestling school. No one was going to do it for you, and no one still will do it for anyone today. So that was what training was like. And there were some days where we would just do nothing but drills. There are other days where we would do nothing but blow-up drills, where we would literally do drills to the point of exhaustion, to the point where you couldn't walk anymore. And again, a lot of that was to build up your in-ring cardio and to build up your wind, because if you're working with someone in a match and you are at the 15-minute mark and you still got 5 minutes to go, you need to have your legs and your body underneath you to get the rest of that match done. And that is exuding every other aspect of body language, facial expressions, vocals, you name it. So I was very fortunate to learn from that environment. And then there would be other days where we would just do nothing but practice matches. And, where I think that I got a really good foundation of training was because of, my trainer, Kevin Knight. He is a stickler and was a stickler for footwork, proper positioning, ring technique. Those were all the really great things that he was, I will always give him credit for at teaching. I will say this, when the name comes up, there are others throughout the industry that have their opinions on Kevin, and that's their opinions alone. Some correlate, some don't correlate. But my relationship with Kevin was, we had some disagreements here and there, but he always treated me fairly. He always treated me with respect, and I always treat individuals based on how they treat me. And that goes along the line in any business. You may disagree or agree with anyone in any line of work, but treat each other respectfully, because it is okay to agree to disagree in that sense. But when it came to training students at the time, Kevin was one of the best trainers that was around in the Northeast area. Anyone that came out of his school was always regarded for their fundamentals, for their footwork. And where I really understood and started grasping as I started getting throughout my training, I want to say this is about a year or two later. On Sundays, he developed an advanced class. And the advanced class was for those that were really progressing along and really wanted to learn some new and different techniques and things, and be able to have some time in the ring to do longer matches. And you were invited to those. You were not, no one could just walk into those. So we would have our normal Sunday classes that would be for about 3 or 4 hours. And I had asked if I could just stick around and watch some of the advanced classes. And, I was allowed to, based on, my prior level of training and how often I came to the school and trained. So over time, as I watched, I would take notes. I would, watch how the guys were doing matches. Sometimes there would just be days and guys would get in the ring and they would go 30 minutes. There would be times they go in and go 60 minutes. They would do 30-minute tags, 60-minute tags. And there was one Sunday training where, for whatever reason, they were a man short. And I was allowed to participate. And I don't remember exactly if it was a singles or if it was a tag match, but it was 30 minutes. And here I am a year and a half, maybe 2. I've had a few, matches under my belt in front of a live audience. But I think I proved something that day, that I had the wind and the cardio, and I was entrusted to go in there and go, 30 minutes. And I was invited to come back. So Sunday trainings were really awesome, because literally I was at my school from, I believe 11 a.m. in the morning till sometimes 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And then after that, a number of us would go to a local diner and we would just continue to talk about the business. I would get to learn from my trainer or any other experienced guys that would walk through the doors. On some weekdays, you never knew who was going to walk through the door and just want to, lend a hand and give some advice. Guys like, Balls Mahoney and Chris Candido, again, another gentleman who played a part early on in my career in teaching me some things from being on events, and the fact that he would, come up to our school because they were guys that were local in the New Jersey area, and they knew Kevin and they knew Biggie Biggs, and, they would always come just to give advice and just get some in-ring time. And I remember there would be nights where Chris would come up to the school, sometimes drop his fanny pack, very popular at the time, wearing his Sergio Ticini tracksuit, a la The Sopranos. And he would just get in the ring with everybody. And he had such a quick, sharp mind, and was just incredible in the ring. And then after that, he would sit with us and we would be at the school till sometimes 2 a.m. And we would just listen to the stories and listen to his philosophies. And, myself being a sponge, I would just soak it all in. I would take all of it in. I would write notes down. I would ask questions. And then when there were local shows in the area that IWF was affiliated with, a number of us would go to those shows. Some were booked and some were not. But those that went, we helped out. We set up the ring. We did security. We did anything that was needed, including setting up chairs to ensure that the event ran correctly. And that was a different side of training in itself, because another aspect of the training is the outside of the ring perspective. And I was always taught, learn how to do everything in this business, because it will help you understand the business full circle. But let's say over time, you don't make it as a professional wrestler. You can make it as a referee. You can make it as a cameraman. You can make it as an audio engineer, do the music, do the lights, you name it. I have done everything in the sport. And that was training in itself for me, learning how to set up different rings, how fast it can be set up, how easy breakdown can be. Anyone that knows me from setting up things on events knows how anal I am when it comes to setting up chairs. I have been to so many shows where the rows of chairs are disheveled, and it just speaks volumes on how unprofessional that event probably is going to run. So for me, I was very strict on how the chairs had to be set up, how straight they needed to be, because everything overall adds to the ambiance. When that fan walks through that door to take their seat, they see a professional setup, a curtain with an entranceway, a beautifully professional looking ring, setups of chairs, merchandise, you name it. So I learned a lot of those pieces early on with my training. And I believe that a lot of schools are still doing it to this day, but I do believe there are also a decent amount of schools that are not doing it this way. So, the last thing that I would say to anybody that is watching this, if you're a fan and you're looking to train at a school, or if you're someone that is training at a school and you don't feel that you're getting the proper training, you need to do your research. You need to find out who the trainers are at that school, find out where they've been, what they've done, what is their reputation in the sport, because that goes a long way when choosing a school. So that's, a little bit part 2 of my training. Next time I'll get into, the seminars that I've done, what I've gained from those, how it helped me start really becoming who Shawn Donavan really is. But until then, I appreciate you watching. Again, please drop me some feedback, drop me some comments, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you would do differently. And if you think I suck, comment on that too. So I will see all of you next time for episode 3 of Diary with a Messiah. We'll title that Seminars and Further Training.